Hi, everybody. I just want to say welcome. Welcome. This is Green Home NYC's Diversity in Green event. We're really happy to have everybody join us today. My name is Crystal. I will be the moderator for today. I'm being joined by my co-host, Louise. She's going to be moderating in the background. Um, so we're going to start off with discussions with the panelists, and then we're going to move on to a Q&A session. At the Q&A session, whoever has a question can either raise their hands through the reaction button. There should be a raise your hand button, and then they can ask the questions themselves. Or if they'd rather, because they're a little too shy, or they'd rather have somebody else ask the question, they can send their questions all the way to Louise, and she'll be able to ask the questions to our panelists. So yeah, so we're all basically here because of what we see as lack of diversity and sustainability. Sustainability is it's a relatively new field, and it still has a lot of ways to grow. But I think one of the biggest problems that we don't really address a lot is the lack of diversity in it. Um, uh, so we have our panelists here with us today to kind of give us their experience and give us their insights to kind of just add to the discussion on making the sustainability field more inclusive and more diverse. So we'll just take it away with our panelists, starting with Feyn. And she'll introduce herself with the rest of the panelists.
Thank you, Crystal, and hello, everyone. I am Feyn Lawrence, Fey for ease of pronunciation, and I'm the founder and CEO of Sologistics, which is a solar energy project management consulting firm. So we do engineering and expediting, and it was founded to address and provide guidance on permitting and design and policy challenges faced by installers and developers in challenging markets, with especially the New York market. I am also active in advancing renewable energy and sustainability policies internationally in the warmer climates in which I am more comfortable. So I'm originally from Trinidad and Tobago in the Caribbean, and I live most of the year in Grenada. It's baby sister neighbor just north of Trinidad, and I'm here also advancing sustainability and renewable energy policies.
Nice. Awesome. So next we'll have Dr. Tracy Daniels.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Dr. Tracy Daniels. I am currently the Department Head of Architecture at Tuskegee University. And I came to sustainability back in 2004 when, right after I'd finished graduate school in Chicago. I had attended an exhibit called Big and Green in Architecture. And it opened my eyes. I was like blown away. Oh my God, this is like awesome. Why have I never heard about this at the time? And from that point began to explore sustainability from an educational standpoint, and then from a community building standpoint. And so I approach sustainability from education. I've worked in renewable energy and affordable housing. My dissertation was looking at social sustainability, because that's when we talk about sustainability as a concept, we all understand there's we look at that trifecta of people, planet, and profit. However, the people side tends to be left out, because we think we can throw money at it and affect people, but unfortunately it affects them in the wrong ways sometimes. Yeah, that's me. Behind me is one of the chairs that our students have designed out of cardboard. So we get a chance to explore sustainability in a lot of different ways, especially from resource reuse.
Nice. Oh, thank you, Dr. Daniels. So next we have Milka.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Milka Rodriguez. I'm currently working as a city research scientist at the New York City Mayor's Office of Sustainability. What I do is pretty much I work in the strategic initiatives team, which focuses on leading programs to reduce greenhouse gas emissions 80% by 2050. Some of the programs are the Carbon Challenge, the NYC Accelerator, as well as the NYC Accelerator Internship Program, which is a collaboration with the CUNY Building Performance Lab. One of their locations is located at City College. A lot of the work that I do is stakeholder engagement, and also incorporating a community organizing and community outreach approach to implementing building energy efficiency programs, being able to provide just recommendations on how to go about doing that, as well as recommendations on how to amplify workforce education in the sustainability sector and connecting young people to jobs in the sustainability sector as well.
Thank you, Milka. So now we're going to go on to Nabi.
Hi, everyone. Good evening. Thanks for joining tonight. So my name is Navjot Gore. Nickname is Nabi. I'm the volunteer program manager at Grow NYC. You may or may not have heard of us. If you have, you might think about our Union Square Green Market, which is our flagship farmers market. It's the biggest one we have. So I oversee volunteer programming and manage them throughout the 5 boroughs. The 3 main programming is our green markets, fresh food box, farm stand, and our compost program. So we need volunteers to help out our nonprofit and with the sites running. And I oversee around 50 volunteers a week and for 25 volunteer opportunities. And just starting a new climate change education in my organization. So I'm very excited about that.
Awesome. Well, thank you for that. Now we're going to go to Saya.
Hello, everyone. My name is Saya Misri, and I am a UK journalist. Yeah, I live in the UK. I am originally from Sweden, but yeah, and I live here a couple of years. What I do, how I approach sustainability, I tend to write about complex topics when it comes to sustainable fashion and the cultural and social justice about it into, you know, bite-sized information that readers can understand for variety of publications, because I feel like, you know, as a third culture adult, some of the topics that I am interested in, you know, is not represented in mainstream media. So I have the cultural capital where, you know, I definitely bring that unique perspective to a variety of publications. So yeah, that is about me, and I'm excited to continue talking further in this panel discussion.
Thank you all for your introduction. We love to hear about your jobs and your experience. Now we're gonna move on. We're gonna talk about what inspired you to get into the field that you're in now. What led you to into the sustainability field, into the career that you're in now. So we're gonna go back to Feyn.
It's tough being at the front of this line. What inspired me? So I, like a lot of people years ago, fell into solar. I have found over the years that people have started choosing renewable energy as their field of expertise or their occupation. But for a lot of us earlier on, it was, you know, coming out of the financial crisis, and there were people with PhDs who were looking for work. And so you kind of took what you got. And I thankfully, luckily, found something in solar. But starting my company, Solargistics, it was after a few years of working at an EPC and recognizing the need for the services that we provide and having a project management background. I just saw the natural progression of being able to provide that to the market. It is important that even then, I was working with quite closely with 1 or 2 women in my workplace, but even then I recognized, and it's no secret, that solar has traditionally been male and pale, as they say. And so it made sense on a number of fronts to strike out on my own and start this company. And from day one, I'm quite proud of a couple of things that I didn't at the time realize were a little clairvoyant, I guess. So one of the things we did very early on was hire with diversity in mind. Another, which is not relevant necessarily to this topic, but I'm still proud of it, so I'll mention it, is from day one, I set up the company to be run remotely from anywhere in the world. So when COVID struck, we were dealing with a lot of the challenges that everyone else was dealing with, but that was not one of them. We had been working remotely as part of our work-life balance and culture for a number of years.
Nice. Well, that's awesome. Okay, so next is Dr. Tracy.
So I came into sustainability, as I'd mentioned, right out of graduate school. Completed a graduate program in architecture and immediately went into teaching. Really just fortuitous that I'd go in that direction. And sustainability just made sense. And, it was a lot of the things that I always wondered why they weren't being addressed. And as I started to explore it more, I realized that you had the opportunity to do things within sustainability that you couldn't do in traditional areas because most markets were already saturated. But if you looked at it through a sustainability lens, it opened up new opportunities. And as I decided to pursue it as a career path, and this actually, we talked about the recession. The market crashed. I was out trying to find a job in architecture, and everything had dried up because architecture is so closely aligned with the economy that I went out on my own, started a company, was like, yeah, I can do sustainability for you. And people were like, well, what is that? And how do you explain that? I'm like, I can do everything. And they're like, but I don't understand that. What is that? And so I pursued a master's degree in sustainability at Columbia in sustainability management because I wanted to figure out how could I articulate that to people when they ask that question. And so, now when I look at it and how I've grown into it, I've had a chance to explore it from a lot of different directions. And my big approach is through the social engagement component. Realizing that sustainability has grand opportunities for the masses. Coming out of the recession, there was the conversation about the other 90%. So I look at sustainability as an opportunity to address the needs of the bottom of the pyramid or the other 90% because there's great opportunity in those spaces.
A lot of entrepreneurship. Okay, so the next person, Milka.
Yeah, so I actually started all the way back in 2005. I was in high school and I had no clue what I wanted to do. And I gave them the most craziest list of jobs, everything from chef and cosmetology and like a whole bunch of stuff. And I'm like, okay, what do you do in your spare time? Because this list is very diverse. I'm like, well, in my spare time, I spend a lot of time outdoors in parks, riding my bike. Like, so you like being outdoors? Yeah. So you like recreation activities? Yeah. You like parks? Mm-hmm. They're like, have you ever thought about the environmental field? And I go, what's that? I'm like, well, I know for a fact I don't want to be a lawyer or a doctor. I don't want anything traditional. There was nothing appealing about being a nurse or a banker or any conventional job. They're like, all I know is I want to help people. They're like, well, maybe you should try to look into this a bit more. And I signed up in high school for an internship program at Central Park. It was pretty much doing ecological restoration in the Hallett Nature Sanctuary. And I applied for, and I loved it because we would spend most of our time just cracking jokes on each other while doing ecological restoration. And then I just thought it was so much fun. So I moved on, went and got my bachelor's in environmental policy and law. Then I worked in a few nonprofits here in New York City, the Bronx River Alliance, and We Act for Environmental Justice. And I got a better sense of not only sustainability, but also like what climate change is and how climate change impacts communities of color, which is something that no one really explained to me before in a way that made sense to me. And then I went ahead and did some community economic development work for a few years and did my master's in sustainability in the urban environment at CUNY City College of New York. And now I'm here working at the mayor's office. So that's pretty much was my trajectory. It just started from not knowing what to do in high school and kind of being nudged in that direction by someone who kind of just asked me, well, what do you like to do in your spare time? Opposed to what do you want to be when you grow up?
Oh, nice. Yeah, thank you. So next, Navi.
That's so good. I guess hearing it from the other panels, it's like great stories. Well, for me, it's a bit complex. I will say that I started with Grow NYC. I was in an AmeriCorps program with the New York City Office of Service, and they had a Civic Corps program. I got placed at Grow NYC, and after my term was over, I applied for the green market manager position, compost coordinator, and a part-time volunteer coordinator position for the zero waste programs. I got all three, managed to put all those three jobs into a full-time job during the week. With that, I got to learn a lot about the anthropogenic changes that are happening on our planet, from waste management to zero waste initiatives, local food access and agriculture, and Grow NYC's environmental education that inspired me to keep pursuing this field of environmental sustainability, that I decided to go back to get my master's of public administration on urban development and sustainability in CUNY Baruch College. So right now I got promoted to oversee all volunteer programs at Grow NYC, but I'm looking forward to bringing more climate change education as well. I think is important through the volunteers, through our employees, and hopefully more community education about that. And yeah, I just felt like we have to protect our only home and we need more people, and it inspired me to go back to school, learn more about it, and keep pursuing my career at it.
I love that. I'm also very passionate about climate change. That's why I'm passionate about coming into the sustainability field. And I'm just glad to see that you're working with volunteers who are also that passionate about it. Okay, so the next person, Saya, sorry.
It's okay, no worry. No, it's amazing, to hear everyone's story. I mean, my personal story. So, I definitely wanted to do something completely different. I trained to become a designer at college, as you call it in the States. But then, so that was my whole idea. That was my whole dream and everything, wanted to become a designer per se. But then, I interned at not really a great place where I got to see the realities of fast fashion. And it was the places that I saw firsthand. Sounds very privileged, but I felt like I didn't really want to be part of a system that just oppresses people. So, I kept thinking of fashion, and I kept thinking of, okay, what, there is a whole different scope of fashion, that we can approach from a research point of view, from a writing point of view. And then so sort of a couple of years when I went to college or, university, that's when I decided to take these frustrations further. And I decided to use my last year of being in university and, produce research about, sustainability in the fashion industry, but what are the practical alternatives. So really, I used my frustrations that I gained from, the realities of this fast fashion place that I sort of saw, and decided to, use that as a motivating factor to go into this field, becoming a journalist. And yeah, it has worked out so far. I'm able to write about stories, that are, bite-sized in information, and to take it further. But yeah, it sort of started off by me interning in a place, and then reshifting my focus from becoming a designer, and then changing that to becoming a journalist, really.
Okay, wow, a long way. So everybody's just, had their own path and their own journey into this industry, and now you're in and you're settled. But I want to actually take it back to any hurdles that might have occurred on your journey to finding a career in sustainability. So yeah, I just want to address that. Is there any difficulties, any problems that you've had? We're going to go back to Feyn. Oh,
So um, when I entered the field of renewables, I never really looked at my role specifically as that of a woman in renewables. I was just committed to developing my expertise in the industry. I experienced the same hurdles that many entrepreneurs experience. So not knowing where to begin, not knowing what you don't know, knowing what the first step ought to be. But specifically as a woman of color, as an immigrant, in terms of hurdles, there was and I've recognized it now in hindsight a lot more than I think I felt I did at the time, but the feeling of a need to overcompensate for being one of the only females in a room full of white males at the time. Now, thankfully, I see that changing every day. Louise is on this call as well, and she and many other women like her are now, I count them as my colleagues that I get to interact with daily. But in terms of hurdles, again, in hindsight, I do see whether real or self-imposed, I felt that there was a need to act a certain way, be more tough or be less tough, depending on the circumstances. And I think there is a difference, and we do need to acknowledge that there's a difference between the nuance and adjusting your approach based on the recipients and feeling pressure or putting pressure on yourself to be something that you're not, or disingenuous in what you are presenting to the world. And that is true across industries. It was particularly true early on in the renewable energy field. And then I think it was Milka who mentioned just not knowing that this was an option. So that was a hurdle early on in deciding and figuring out what to do with my life. And it's fine if you don't know that immediately out of school. You don't know what you want to be when you grow up. It's fine. That takes many people many years, and that's great. That's not a problem. It doesn't have to be a problem. But just the lack of knowledge of the options available to us in the sustainability field was a hurdle that I would like to, and I've seen us already working towards overcoming. There are many more options available. There are lots of offshoots of traditional roles. I'd like to see that advertised more, just made more readily available. And then when we start to talk about what can we do to address the lack of diversity in the growing field, I'll speak a little bit more about what I think we can do in terms of just spreading the knowledge of what is available.
I totally agree. As a woman of color, I remember reading a while ago when I was back in college from W.E. Du Bois about double consciousness and how people of color have to basically have to consciousness who they are and how they are presented to the world and how they have to basically seeing themselves through other people's lenses. So we feel double the pressure to kind of put on a role so that we're not perceived in a certain way. And I definitely see that in the sustainability field, just like in any other field, any other job. So I definitely see that as being a hurdle for people of color. So that was just something I wanted to add to that. So we're going to move on to Dr. Tracy.
So when I think about hurdles, I think in a way, because of when I jumped into the field, was so new to the world. I mean, people couldn't even spell. There was no definition for sustainability. I mean, I bought like every book that was out there at the time. It was like 7 books. You know, I mean, now it's like a whole library full of books. And so that's put me in a really privileged space, because I, you know, have consistently been the only person having a conversation about this, which is what drove me to pursue an advanced degree in sustainability, because I wanted to get around a whole lot of other people who were just as passionate about it. And I wanted to compare the work that I was doing to what other people basically who we would deem to be experts were doing, so I can see how I'm positioned. And so when I think about this, really the biggest hurdle that I've encountered is being comfortable with carving your own pathway. You know, I think when we look at all of our professions, and you know, I'm coming out of architecture, where African Americans are less than 2% of licensed architects in the country. So in terms of marginalization, that's something that we find across the board in just about every area that we look at, you know, in this country. But within sustainability, I think I found a lot of strength in the fact that communities of color have always lived sustainably. You know, it just wasn't a term. It just was like, that's how we do. You know, if I need to, you know, I'm tight on money, I need to conserve. And so we're going to do things that are going to allow us to conserve our money. You know, we're not going to waste because it costs us to waste. So I think the biggest hurdle that I've experienced is, how do you become comfortable with the idea that you're an expert, right? Every single one of us on this panel and those that are listening in are experts, because there's a way that we're approaching sustainability that it is not written about right now. We're writing the book on it. And there's somebody out here writing stories about the work that we're doing. And so we have to be really comfortable in knowing that we're trailblazers in this environment, that our perspective that we bring to the table is a very unique perspective. And we're not quite marginalized yet, because there's so few people who even understand what this field is. And so we can jump out there extremely bold. You know, in my case, I work in African-American communities and any other community that's being marginalized on different levels. And so I can jump out there boldly and say, like, this is a problem, and here are some solutions that we can address it. If we want to look at it from a racial standpoint, I can show you how what you're doing is problematic. If we want to look at it from an economic standpoint, I can show you how it's problematic. A resource, and better yet, as a result of sustainability, I can show you how all those intertwine, and we can address these issues and hopefully create a better environment for people.
Right. Yeah, I definitely agree with what you and Feyn have talked about with sustainability just not being something that's that was basically brought to us. We haven't really been introduced into the sustainability field, so we've never seen it as an option for a place to grow. And I know that you, Milka, talked about, you know, wanting to pursue something, but not seeing sustainability as a career path until somebody had mentioned to you. So I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about your hurdles.
So there have been too many. I think I've considered many times writing a book on it, or maybe starting my own YouTube channel on it, because I feel like at this point I've been through everything you can possibly think of on this field, not only academically, but professionally. Just being an inner city kid in a program, right, related to this, being the only brown skinned person in the department that I was in undergrad for several years, and most of my classes, most of the time not really understanding the information that was delivered to me. I feel like I didn't, even though I got a degree in undergrad in environmental studies and policy and law, I didn't really understand what I was even learning until I actually had to do environmental work in the field. So there's definitely a lot of difficulties with how you are perceived, right? There's a way that we speak in the inner city that is normal for us, that is not normal for other people. A dialect that we use that is completely, many times, inoffensive amongst people who come from these urban areas, but when you are placed in a community or around people whose main understanding of people of color comes from TV, or I've met people who will tell you they had never met a Mexican before, they had never met an African American before. I didn't think that was possible as a teenager, being raised in New York City, but that was an eye opener for me. A lot of things, being really cognizant of what may or may not be perceived as rude by people who are from a different culture than yourself. Maybe the way that you speak is too direct. Then you have to figure out how to beat around the bush to make other people feel comfortable. Or many different things. So obviously academically, for sure. And then professionally, being able to not only get your foot in the door, but be able to stay in there and actually make a change and be taken seriously and receive the mentoring that you need. There's not much mentoring, I think, for people of color, people like myself who come from the inner city. There's no, you have to really carve your own path. Like, this is really something that you have to want to do, because there are many hurdles when it comes to interviewing, right? You have to be the way you present yourself during an interview. Also, there's issues with the fact that even during interviews, your responses can be perceived very differently from someone else who delivers the same response, or your resume can be perceived very differently simply because of the way you look. Someone else might have the exact same resume with the exact same credentials as you, but because of the way you look and the way you communicate, it can be interpreted very differently. So I think that looking at it, most of the difficulties are definitely related to more like the soft skills, not necessarily the hard skills. You can go to school and learn engineering and architecture and all these things and be really good at it, but it comes in when you're having to deal with people that are very different than you. And although you're all working in the same office and have an interest in sustainability, their interest in sustainability may be from a totally different perspective, very purist. Maybe they only care about reducing greenhouse gas emissions and don't quite understand the equity issues of reducing greenhouse gas emissions, or employing a building energy efficiency program, or solar, or a volunteer program, and so on and so forth. So, I mean, I could write a whole, like I said, I've considered many times writing a whole book on this, because I really do think that people of color, inner city people, need a roadmap. They really need a roadmap and mentoring on this, because I really wish that I had that. And I have a lot of information that I think that I could provide. But I mean, I think I covered most things, but there's way more.
Nice. Yeah, I definitely feel you on the lack of resources, especially for people in inner cities, because yeah, resources are just not given to them, especially from a young age, to pursue a career like a career in sustainability that can really give them a career of purpose. And that's definitely something we do need to work on. So next we'll have Nabi.
So there are some hurdles that do come in this field. I think all the panelists did put it correctly, as that diversity. I feel like even now that it's increasing, but you will see that it might be more, not a lot of color in the leadership fields in this in the leadership roles in this field, and that shouldn't deter you. I think you should bring ideas of how to increase that. You should at Grow NYC we also work with communities that don't have access to a lot of environmental education or green spaces, or great food access. And when you actually educate and outreach to the community and you see how they've been ignored, it actually kind of hits hard in a way, and you kind of want to be there and want to increase their voices as much as you can, because these are the people that are going to, BIPOC communities are the ones that are going to face the impacts of climate change the most, and other environmental justice issues. So I think that's one way of just like striving to fight for more policies and programs in these communities that have deserved it in the beginning. But I think that's the hurdle of just like not letting other things come in the way to deter those voices and these programs away, but try to increase it. And I'd say another hurdle for me is sometimes if we do outreach and education just in generally in New York, people are always busy and they have other things. Sometimes people don't have time to think about the environment. So I think it's something in a way kind of approaching environmental issues or climate change in a way of an economical issue, a societal thing. So I think that was like one experience I had. So I had to figure out some other ways of how to talk about this. And then people are like, oh yeah, like I don't want to pay this many taxpayer dollars for my trash to go to Pennsylvania. Like, so that's my take on it.
Yeah, I definitely see a lot about like environmental justice when it comes to communities of color and them being the most impacted by issues when it comes to the environment because they definitely just tend to get the brunt of it. So I definitely get where you're coming from. Okay, Saya.
I love what you guys have said, and yeah, I think if the question about have you experienced any hurdles, I mean, I think it goes back to like when you are interested in the sustainability conversation, right? But you aren't necessarily someone that in the professional world they expect you to look like or to be. Like I second what Faye said about the need to overcompensate. You're always having to work, twice as hard than your, white counterparts, are. For example, in the UK, like environmental professions, is the second least diverse careers up there, which is kind of ironic because when it comes to sustainability is about the people aspect, right? So if we don't have the people from the communities that we want to get involved in order to reduce our carbon footprint or to engage or to do all of this amazing work, to save the planet, like what kind of world are we really, wanting to create as well? So hurdles, of course, I have faced my hurdles. I grew up, I stuck out as a sore thumb, as the Arab kid in Sweden, and definitely had my hurdles where diversity was non-existing, and sometimes where you are the only person in a room where you're the ethnic minority person. But I don't know. I just like to challenge it further. Like Dr. Kwesi said, we are all carving our own path, and it might be this foreign thing, and we all have our unique perspective that we should bring to the table.
Thank you all for sharing the hurdles that that you've all seen in pursuing your career in sustainability. So now that we've talked about some problems, let's talk about solutions. Let's talk about what can be done to make the sustainability field more inclusive and more diverse, and how we can expand this growing industry to include people that look more like us. So we're gonna start back with Feyn.
So conversations like these are helpful. So this is the first step. This is the baseline for how we can help to continue to have these conversations, to normalize these conversations, to bring to the attention of those who aren't aware or haven't experienced it, that this is something that does need to be looked at and addressed in big ways and in little ways. There's undoubtedly a need for greater opportunities and support for women and minorities in the field of renewable energy or any sustainability field. So one of the things that we can and should be doing, and at Sologistics we've done this from day one, is make diversity and inclusivity among our core values. So in my experience, having a diverse team and an inclusive work culture is not only common sense and long overdue, but it has a plethora of data-supported benefits. So for example, we're seeing that overall diversity in general and gender diversity in particular, especially on the executive level, improves a company's economic performance and profitability, and there is data to support that. It provides a clear competitive advantage. So our hiring practices, if we are in a position to influence those, should support the diversity. I have an incredible team, and that team reflects the diversity of the markets in which we work. So white cis males, women of color, across the board, there has and always, and there needs to be diversity in the teams that we hire, and our policies should encourage that. I believe it was Milka, again, who mentioned, and this comes up a lot in these conversations, greater opportunities for mentoring. Those of us who have gone before, should be assisting in and providing mentoring opportunities for those of us still treading that path. Because we have that experience, we know what it was like, we know what those hurdles that might be encountered are, and we can help avoid or at least navigate when you come upon that hurdle. Get involved, form committees. So I am a member of the New York State Solar Energy Industries Association, which advocates for sustainable growth of solar energy across New York State. And in a subgroup of that, I'm a member of the JEDI Committee, which is a very cool name for a very cool thing. It's Justice, Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion. And what we do is put a spotlight on, sit down and brainstorm how we can make the organization more palatable and inclusive to women and minorities and BIPOC. And then programs like on the state and even the federal level, I hope start to support diversity on a greater level. So Logistics, again, is a minority and woman-owned business enterprise. And what that means is that there's essentially a set aside of every state or federal contract that must be fulfilled by a minority organization. You must go there and do your due diligence and look for one that is qualified to fulfill that scope of work first before you just give it to the usual guys. And that certainly has been beneficial to us and to others like us that might have been overlooked repeatedly in our sustainability fields. And then including diversity in programs like Startup New York. So Startup New York has a number of benefits for new organizations, but it tends to be technology focused, and that as well is wonderful. I think there is a huge need for a lot of those benefits to also be given to early stage or developing minority businesses. So those are just some of the things that we can do on a grand scale. And then again, as I said, having these conversations is important, normalizing these conversations, bringing awareness to them, changing our behaviors, forming committees within our organizations to tell our bosses or be the bosses that say, I am going to ensure that my policies support diversity and inclusion.
You're on mute.
Oh, sorry. Sorry.
I got worried there for a minute. I thought, did I just say all of that and I was on mute the whole time? But you're on.
Yeah, it's technology. But I love what you just said. As a business leader, it's so needed to put sustainability, diversity to be diversity forward in any workplace, because I feel like that's not something that's it's addressed, but that's not something that's acted on. And if it's acted on, it comes from a place of, oh, I guess we have to do it, so let's let's do it, but not in a meaningful way. So I love how you put that forward, and you really you emphasize that in your organization, to make it more of a melting pot. Because in any business, for any business to be really successful, there has to be a diversity of ideas. And I honestly do think that diversity is our strength, and having a diversity of ideas and a diversity of views can only help us. So with that said, we're moving on to Dr. Kwesi.
So, I think that, first of all, diversity is about the people you see. If you want people to gain access to an environment, you have to show them that it's possible. Like a panel right here, we have different ethnicities, different races, different genders being represented. And so you take these types of forums, you put people, high school children, high school kids, young adults, young professionals, folks who are just trying to figure out what is possible, put them in front of people, like this panel. You see somebody who looks like you realize there's an opportunity for you to pursue that as well. So diversity is about who you see. Second, go to places where minority populations are being served in abundance. I'm at Tuskegee University, which is a historically Black university. You have minority serving institutions all over the country. Places like Tuskegee, Crystal, you mentioned W.E.B. Du Bois, Booker T. Washington's campus, we were built on the concept of sustainability. We made our own bricks and then turned those bricks into buildings, and we created everything at our campus, and that was done through education. And so there are places that you can go in this country where, if you're really serious about diversity, it's really not a thing. You can go after organizations that focus on addressing the concerns of minority populations. So every organization within business, within engineering, you have NSBE, the National Society of Black Engineers. Within architecture, we have the National Organization of Minority Architects. In law, they have their own organization as well. And so if you're looking for diversity within sustainability, there was an organization I was connected with a few years back called Blacks in Green out of Chicago. I mean, it's not hard to find people that are doing the work. You just have to do the searching for it. Realizing that diversity is also at the core of sustainability. I mean, if you look at agriculture, we talk about diversity, biodiversity. If you look at renewable energy, we generally don't encourage one form of renewable energy. We encourage a diverse body of solutions to meet those needs because they support one another. And so, if we're really serious about this, we have to realize that diversity is not a thing. It's like, if you truly do believe in the core of what sustainability is about, then you have to do this, because this is not doing it means that you really are just greenwashing and you're not really about this work. Corporate social responsibility. I mean, through the over time, CSR is kind of, just like sustainability, it starts to get, less appreciated. But there are core values within sustainability that require diversity. And, CSR is an area that you can look into. If you're a corporation, there are tenets that you can explore that will address the needs of diversity within it. So, ensure that your business model is about diversity, and not just diversity, but inclusion, right? It's not about having more people at the table that look like us. It's actually saying, what is your opinion about what we're talking about, and how can we celebrate what you have to bring to the table? Keep sustainability near the ground. At times, and I know this through, we encourage people to get advanced degrees. We encourage people to get training. Sustainability is as simple as protecting the environment, right? Don't pollute Mother Earth. It's not that difficult. It does not require advanced degrees to make it happen. Advanced degrees are just to make sure that you have people who have a sensitivity to this, that when they open their mouth, you shut up and listen to them because they know something about this, right? There's somebody out there who certifies them. But, capturing rainwater, it is not something hard. It was kids, you opened your mouth, You caught rainwater. So, I mean, these are simple things. It's not something hard. Keep it near the ground. Realize that we can promote sustainability and diversity. If we look at things like urban agriculture, we have communities of color all over the country and all over the world who are finding ways to repurpose their spaces that have been, if we want to talk about the social problems, they're repurposing spaces that have been neglected for decades, and they are finding the solutions. And so go to the ground and see what they're doing. Energy efficiency. Energy efficiency is one of the greatest ways that you can satisfy the needs of populations of color. If you want to deal with diversity, show them how you can use sustainability to address their needs. Energy efficiency is one of them, and same as renewable energy. If you can put money back in people's pockets, they realize that there's a space for them because they can address what's important to them. And the last piece is, I'd say, just realize that you can elevate, you have to elevate the social aspect of sustainability. We really have to get out of this idea of saying, of really only looking at sustainability through the lens of the financial market or the lens of the environmental space. Because the environmental space and the financial space are two great spaces, but they live among themselves. And if you're doing this work properly, they're going to support one another. That second component of the social is rarely acknowledged, because we say if we throw money at it, we're going to improve people's lives. Or if we improve the environment, we're going to improve people's lives. The truth is, when you look at things like gentrification, that does not improve a person's life. So when we improve an environment by throwing money at it, or we improve the environmental conditions of that environment, but we get rid of the people that were living there for generations, you are not being sustainable. You're actually being the opposite of sustainable. If we're looking at fast fashion and we say, hey, let's go ahead and throw money at, making more clothes, and we're giving jobs, but we're not looking at the social impact of poor labor practices, then you're not being sustainable. You're being the opposite of sustainable. And so that's not diversity. That is like the total opposite. And so if we're going to be serious about this work, there are many ways we can explore it. Just do it. It's not hard. If you turn around and you look at the people that you serve, and you look at the people on your board and they don't look the same, if I'm serving, if my board is predominantly white or predominantly male, but I'm serving a population that is, multi-ethnic and gendered, then you're doing something wrong, because you're not looking at the full spectrum of the people that your stakeholders. You're not looking at them.
I love that. I think that's definitely something that's missing in trying to bridge sustainability with diversity, is kind of going to where people of color are and kind of incorporating the sustainability message into their own stories and the solutions that they've already come up with, and just showing them that, hey, what you've already done in your neighborhood, or what you are already doing in your own life, be sustainable, and sustaining, I don't know, your household is a form of sustainability, and this can be bridged into a career in this field. I love that. I think that that's definitely needed. We need to put the story into the context of people, in the context of the way that people of color already live. And with that being said, we're going to move on to Milka.
Yeah, so I mean, a lot of what Dr. Crazy said, I agree with. I think definitely workforce development is a way that we can increase diversity in sustainability, especially workforce education. Right now, there are many different programs out there that will train you on sustainability, but not enough sustainability jobs. And the sustainability jobs that do exist, the barriers to entry are very high. And sometimes I would say so high that it's unnecessarily high. The number of certifications and the years of experience and I don't know, a whole bunch of other things that they request is really not necessary, you know? So I think that, and some things that I've been thinking about would be, this idea of maybe having kind of like a chamber of commerce, but for people who maybe want to start businesses in sustainability. And You know, we have Chamber of Commerce for everything, for LGBT and for Hispanics and for whole bunch of other things that I can't remember. It would be good to have kind of like a hub simply for those things and integrate those in, I would say, like communities of color, because there's a lot of people who are interested in these. They just don't know how to go about it. And another thing that I would say about increasing diversity in the space is you also need, it's not so much about attracting people into the space, it's about supporting people in the space once they're in there. Supporting students in their first and second year of college who maybe need a mentor, helping them identify mentors that support their vision and that can properly guide them. So it's great to employ all these tactics to attract people to this field, but it means nothing if they're not able to finish that degree and find gainful employment in jobs or companies that where they can be very impactful. I also second what Dr. Crazy said about go to where the people of color are, right? I didn't really quite understand a lot of things related to like environmental sustainability and stuff until I started working in these communities. So, you know, a lot of these high level concepts just seemed extremely boring beyond all human belief possible. And I couldn't wait until we, you know, that week of like greenhouse gas emissions or whatever it was would pass at school, because then I wouldn't have to hear about it for the rest of the year. And it wasn't until I was actually on the ground doing community organizing, community outreach for We Act and for some of these other, you know, Sustainable South Bronx and Bronx River Alliance and other types of organizations here in New York City that are directly employing environmental programs, that it all started to make sense. It made sense when, you know, climate change, when you have to go door knocking in the summertime in a building that doesn't, you know, adhere to climate legislation, and you're frying in there, and then the climate change really starts to make sense, you know, all of these high level topics. So I think that to increase diversity, just to sum it up, there needs to be more workforce education, greater mentoring, especially for the younger generation, and just go where the people of color are. Don't feel that you need to go somewhere else. You'd be surprised how much further you can get ahead in this field if you just stick around people who are like yourself than if you go to, like, let's say some fancy school that's predominantly white simply for that fancy degree. You might not get the type of support that you need. You might get the degree, but what's a degree without any support? What's a degree without any mentoring? What's a degree without access to network, access to people who have your back and are willing to champion you in the workspace and ensure that you stay in that workspace?
Sorry, I muted myself. Thank you for sharing. I totally agree with you about people of color needing resources to be able to work in this industry, because, you know, we're not really shown sustainability as a career path unless, you know, people basically come into our spaces and kind of educate us about, you know, about this industry and how we can get into it. Because it's not that we don't care, it's just that, you know, we're not really it's not something that's, you know, something that's brought up to us. So I definitely agree with you. We definitely need to work on bringing more resources and awareness to communities of color. So Nabi had to leave us. She has a meeting, but she wanted me to share with you her opinion. She basically feels that we need to increase leaders that are involved in environmental justice. And I definitely agree with her on that because, again, communities of color are the ones that are disproportionately impacted by issues when it comes to the environment. They get illnesses at a higher rate, like asthma and other lung issues from pollution. And that could be a bridgeway to kind of inviting them into this space and making them problem solvers because they see this happening in their community. So I'm going to just go on to our last question. And basically, we want to talk about what advice we would give to people, students in high school and college, post-grad, about wanting to come into the sustainability field. What advice would you give them? And we're going to start with Feyn.
So I would say start with the knowledge, acknowledge and internalize that inclusion and diversity are key enablers of growth, and you should view them as a competitive advantage. So know what you are bringing to the table once you have done your homework, once you have pursued that line of education, recognize that you are stepping in with a competitive advantage. A lot of people said networking, and I think that's very important. So network with people who might be mentors, seek out a mentor. And for those of us who are able, as Dr. Daniels said, recognize that you are an expert and be a mentor. And then find your niche. So again, I think it was Dr. Daniels who said something along the lines of determining how you can bridge the gap between what is needed in an underserved community and sustainability, and figure out what is the sweet spot, what can you bring to the table to help bridge that gap. So for us, for example, we unabashedly promote ourselves because we are the experts in the field of navigating New York solar and all its intricacies. Find that sweet spot, find that niche, and provide that to an underserved community that you are familiar with, that you are a part of, that you grew up in, that you understand and commiserate with. So network, be a mentor, seek a mentor, acknowledge what you're bringing to the table, do your homework, step one, be ready for it. And then find that niche, find that sweet spot.
Awesome. Okay. So next we're going to go to Dr. Kwesi.
So I have to say, I think the best way to do this field is, it depends on how you're approaching it. So if you're coming into it from an existing profession, stay with the profession, just explore what sustainability has to offer. I promise you, every single profession that's out there, you look at it through a sustainability lens, you're looking at new opportunities, that you're looking at things in ways that nobody else is historically looking at it, because this field, it really goes back as it's about 1987. However, that's when we started to come up with the definitions for it, and some go a little bit earlier than that. But it wasn't really until 97, in the 2000s, when it really started to hit the world, and now it's starting to get a little more mainstream. We're looking at what, 20 years, 25 years? I mean, that's less than a generation. And so that means that you take any profession that you're in already, you can jump into sustainability, continue to do that profession, and it's going to open up a whole new pathway for you than you understood previously. Now, if you're not coming into sustainability, you're much younger, you're coming in from high school or earlier, and you're like, this is really exciting. Look at your interest. What is something that you're passionate about? What is that thing that you're like, God, I hate walking down the street and seeing this all the time. Like, I really wish this could change. That is your pathway into sustainability, and you are now the expert. You just have to now get the tools to do the work. And then you can go back into the spaces that you're from, go back into your communities, wherever that is, and you can do the work, because I don't care what type of community you come from, whether it's an affluent or a low income, whether it is a minority serving community or a white serving community, whether it's within America or outside of America. Every place has a problem when it comes to these issues related to sustainability, and you can get in there at the ground floor. And as I said, you are that expert, because you're bringing something to the table that no one else is bringing to the table, most likely. And you can actually bring your passion to the table with you. And then lastly, reach out. I think every single one of us, you can Google us, or, you can get our contact information. Feel free to reach out to us. We can all point you in really strong directions for how you can do what you want to do.
Awesome. I definitely agree with what you and Feyn said about getting involved and getting involved early. So needed, especially if you're younger in high school. So next we're gonna go to Milka.
So I would say, and I've said this so many times already, if you're especially starting out, regardless of whether you're in high school or transitioning from a different field, get a mentor, right? Right now, because of the pandemic, you can't really network the way we used to be able to network. But Green Home NYC is a really great resource for that. I know they have a lot of networking opportunities. But then there are other organizations out there that host these kinds of events. That, I'm pretty sure you can get referrals too from Green Home NYC. I would say for students in high school, identify either a career counselor that can connect you to internships or volunteer opportunities in your community from a really young age, like I did, and just go volunteer. Just check it out, see what it's about. Another thing that I did was I pretty much worked in all these different organizations. At the beginning of my career, my resume looked like a rainbow of sustainability because, I did an internship at the Grand Canyon and I was doing some transportation work, and it was just all these random things, all related to sustainability. Because I was trying to figure out, what do I like? What makes what makes me want to wake up in the morning and do this thing, And then you realize, I don't really like working with children. Oh yeah, I like environmental education, but I don't really feel like I want to, I don't know, be door knocking all the time, and so on and so forth. But you got to try it to figure out if you like it or not. At least you can say you did it and gave it a chance. And try to maintain really good relationships with your former supervisors, with your former coworkers. To this day, I still talk to supervisors from like almost 10 years ago. Just I've always tried to maintain that relationship because they are also, in a sense, especially if they're people of color, they're also kind of pioneers in their field as well. And they can pass on their knowledge to you when you're going through a rough time, and at least comfort you when things aren't going maybe the way you expected, either with a new job or with an interviewing process and so on and so forth. And I think I always say, if you're not able to identify a mentor, you can always seek higher education, go for your master's and something like this. But I will say, try to always surround yourself with people that can champion you as a professional, and that can really highlight what you bring to the table, and try to always maintain those people in your inner circle at all times, and try to find a mentor that's a little open-minded. So if you're someone like myself starting out that veered off in every random direction that was available in the sustainability sector, that they're not too judgmental. They realize you're still young, you're still trying to figure it out. And for people who are transitioning from a different field, we need all your skills, whether your skills are marketing or financial skills, or whatever it is that you bring to the table. We need all of that. Just try to figure out a way that translates into this field. But almost every skill you can possibly think of is directly transferable into the sustainability sector. Just make sure that you understand the sustainability component of that work, so that you are properly prepared for an interview.
Nice. Thank you. Oh, Saya, I'm so sorry. I think I skipped you for the last round. Too many things bouncing around in my chat.
No worries.
So I didn't give you a chance to answer about diversity, how we can address the lack of diversity. If you want to touch a little bit on that, and then maybe touch on what your advice would be.
Sure. I'll do it quickly. In regards to the lack of diversity, obviously you have to hire people from the communities that you want. It's great to have conversations about about including people, but at the same time, like diverse people aren't put at a disadvantage. Diverse people have the cultural capital. You know, I think Feya said, you know, look at a company's, you know, return on investment. You know, by having a diverse workforce, you know, you will improve your company's economic performance. So really, I think it's very important that, you know, we start seeing people that looks like ourselves, you know, represented in sustainability jobs. And simply put, if you as a company or brand or government agency or whatever it is, you know, if you don't know what you're doing, simply put, hire someone that knows and, you know, highlight that. But also at the same time, you know, when it comes to BIPOC, you know, make sure you also support, you know, people from different backgrounds, I would say, and like entry-level jobs, whether it's like work experience or internships, and then actually train them up and provide with promotional opportunities. Sorry. Yeah, and then in regards to advice, you know, what would I give to anyone's looking into starting? I mean, it totally depends, you know, if you're starting, you know, from high school or college or mid-career. I think just start, you know, start opening up a Twitter account if you're not on Twitter already. Follow, you know, people that you're interested in. You know, follow the latest trends and see what's going on. Start engaging in conversation and set yourself a challenge. Can I communicate my thoughts and opinions in 140 characters? You'll be surprised. You can actually do that. But also, I think, you know, if your ideal career goal, if you're wanting to work in a corporate background, you know, look into how you can, because a part of sustainability is how can you save a company money, right? So, you know, come up with solutions rather than just the problems. Find your niche and just find out the companies and people. And like Dr. Daniel said, you know, I'm sure you can do a quick Google search on all of us, and then people are more than willing, you know, to help you and give you virtual coffees. So it's just being proactive in the search and just don't take no for an answer. Just keep going.
Love that. I love that. Okay, so now we're going to open it up for questions from the audience. If anybody has a question that they'd like to ask themselves, you can raise your hand in the reactions button below, or you can direct them to Louise. Does anybody have any questions? I don't know if Louise, you got any questions? Louise?
I actually haven't received any questions, and I imagine that's because all of the panelists have floored everyone. You have all been very thorough, which is just amazing. Yeah.
I actually have one more question for all the panelists that I wanted to ask everybody. So in the last year, we've seen a lot of talk about Black Lives Matter, which is bridged to just the general awareness of diversity issues and lack of inclusion. And the topics have gotten, they've been great, but some have been divisive. So I just wanted to ask how you felt about the conversations that have been happening in the last year and the attention to diversity, and has it helped? Do you think people and companies thinking about hiring people, do you think it's kind of like opened up their eyes to be more inclusive, especially in the sustainability field and other industries as well?
Is this open to everybody?
Yeah, this is open. This is just an open,
okay.
yeah.
I would say, yeah, I definitely see how the Black Lives Matter, you know, that whole movement has definitely impacted the way that here at the city, we think about how to implement building energy efficiency programs for people of color. We also, I think it's also kind of highlighted how important it is to think about equity in the work that you do, and also equity in the way in which you treat your fellow co-workers as well. And I think that equity language is something that we're looking to introduce more into our programming, and not only equity language, but implementation of programs in a way that is equitable. Keep looking at what are the ways in which we can measure that, thinking critically about what are the key performance indicators of programming that we can start measuring equity metrics, and things of that nature. So that's some of the ways in which Black Lives Matter has definitely impacted the work. And I think it's become easier as a person of color to push forward certain ideas that maybe before would have been sidelined. So I feel like definitely it's definitely made things easier, I think, at least for now.
Yeah.
I would say, as an educator, an administrator, it is, man, I just say I wish the support was always here, right? When you see the way that I say I'm dismayed on one end that we had to get to this point. There have been way too many deaths that have happened in order for us to get to the point where we're now saying we're going to do something about it. That's just that one commentary. So on the other end, I'm happy that we're finally having this conversation, and the support is being brought to the table. We're finding a lot of support on our at our institution from folks who are literally coming to where we are. They're asking the questions. They're saying, how can we be supportive of your programming? How can we provide support in ways? I mean, we've had firms who have said we would love to come in the classroom and teach your students how we do our workflow, how we do our work. Hey, can we help, by offering scholarships to students? Can we help with purchasing software or, giving students access to certain things? I mean, these are the type, internships or we've had firms create virtual internships for students. Granted, that's something that now, because of COVID, it creates new opportunities that weren't there before. But I'm pleased to see it, and I really, really, really at the core of my heart pray that this is a new normal. And as we've been talking about COVID and the new things we're dealing with, some of this is a new normal. I hope this is part of the new normal and it stays, because if it is just episodic, where while bodies are being murdered in the street and folks are protesting to those murders, that people are saying, well, I don't want to be associated with those white guys or with those kinds of policies. When folks are marching on the Capitol, people, well, I'm not that kind of person. And so if that's what is opening you up to be, seek out diversity, I hope that there is a change of heart and that you see the value in the work that you're doing. And if you are really here about the work, I hope that you're using this as an opportunity to bring about true capacity building so that we can create a better world. I mean, not just, a better America, not just, a better my little society or my better firm, like a truly better world, because sustainability is not about me or you, it's about all of us. And if we are really doing, serious about this work that we're doing, we'll create that beloved community that Dr. King, preached for before he passed away, and we'll see true change in 20 to 30 to, ideally, within 60 years, we'll look back and say, this was that turning point.
Love that. Does any other panelists have anything to add?
Yes, just very quickly. So I think, as has been said, that social justice and the Black Lives Matter movement was the impetus for a lot of introspection in a lot of companies. I know that some people still think that what companies are now doing is just performative, but that has not been my experience. So I'm seeing, and it's quite heartening to see, that the difficult conversations are being had. We are looking with a lens of equity and inclusion and having those internal conversations. What are our, I say we, I mean companies in general that I interact with frequently. I'm seeing the conversations happening. I'm seeing the questions being asked. So while the social justice movement was the impetus, it has been the driving force behind the changes that we are seeing, the questions that we are asking, the conversations that we are having, the incorporation of equity lens in our internal work and our external client engagements. And there will be, and I think we all need to recognize and support that there needs to be difficult conversation. There needs to be space where someone can ask a question that we don't want to have to explain why it's wrong. But if there is genuine outreach and to understand, then some of us, if we're not too exhausted from having done it over and over, need to bridge that gap and say, all right, let me explain it to you. Let me explain why this is wrong. Let me explain why this is not acceptable. Let me explain why there is a movement in progress right now. So I'm seeing it happening, and I'm heartened by it, because it does not feel performative on most levels. It feels genuine.
Oh, I love that. I love to hear that, because I've had the same worries. I'm like, well, are they really interested in helping, or is this something that's performative? But I'm glad to hear that from what you've been seeing, it's more genuine. How about, does anybody else have anything they'd like to add before we wrap up? No? Okay. We've come to an end of our discussion. I hope that everybody joining us was able to get something out of this discussion. And we're definitely happy to have had you. And I know that this discussion, diversity can sometimes be a hard topic to bridge. But just like Feyn said, I think that the best way to discuss, to deal with hard topics is just to have open discussion. So I hope that everybody that came got something out of this. So I'm going to leave the last part of our program to Louise. She's just going to go over Green Home NYC and how to get in contact with us. Yeah, so take it away, Louise.
Thank you, Crystal, for moderating one of the best discussions I've heard in a while. And thank you to each of the panelists for, being honest and true and sharing your experience and, reaching these topics that can be very difficult, but need to be discussed. With that said, I'd like to, remind everyone what Green Home NYC is all about. We're, fully volunteer-run organization. We've been in New York City for quite some time, over a decade, probably longer. And due to the pandemic, we've moved all of our events online, of course. The next event is part of the Forums group, which will actually be the following Wednesday. And you can find out more. Basically, we're Green Home NYC on all social media, including LinkedIn, YouTube, and Facebook. And if you want to actually, volunteer with us, maybe you're really interested in writing an article, it's a great way also to get to meet people in terms of networking. And also you might be young and you just want to get a little bit more of experience. Reach out to greenhomenyc.org. You can sign up to our newsletter and find out more about how to volunteer with us. So again, thank you so much to everyone. Thank you, Crystal, for moderating and organizing this whole event. And hope to see you all at our next event next month.
Oh, Louise, I forgot to ask the panelists if you want to write in the chat really quickly how people can get in contact with you. That'd be great, so our audience can figure out how to get it to reach you. So. Sorry, Louise.
Of course. And also for all of those who signed up to the Eventbrite link, in the description, I've linked each panelist's LinkedIn page. So maybe you can reach out to them like that.
Right. Sounds good. Okay.
Great event. Thank you all.
Yes,
Thank
absolutely.
you.
Wow. So yeah, gonna end this event, and thank you all for participating, and thank you audience for joining us in this very important discussion.